Hello, my name is Dante Renee, and welcome to the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more. Like tonight's film, this is 1980's Blonde Ambition. Not to be confused with the popular Madonna tour or some other films that are called Blonde Ambition. I believe is there one with Jessica Simpson? Could be wrong, but not to be confused there. This is a 1980 hardcore triple X film from the golden age and quite unique. Now, on this YouTube channel, you will see a video on a film that I did maybe, close to the early days of this channel, which is about 10 years now. This channel's been around in doing this in 2026, this video. The movie was called Myra Breckinridge with Raquel Welch and many others. But sad to say, Myra Breckinridge is still stuck on DVD, and I don't know where it'll ever be. Like, that is ripe for a Blu-ray, at least. It's a masterpiece. So check that video out for Myra Breckinridge on this YouTube channel. But Blonde Ambition, the reason why I mention that, it's because it seems to occupy a similar headspace to me as Myra Breckinridge does, but in a hardcore world. Now, the tagline on the front here says, if you liked Deep Throat and Singing in the Rain, you're gonna love Blonde Ambition. The first adult extravaganza. That last line I never saw before, so I just read it for the first time on camera. The first adult extravaganza. So there's a world that the Blonde Ambition occupies for me that is very similar to Myra Breckinridge. And there's that idea of old Hollywood. There's that idea of old showbiz. And we also work off of a story that kind of deals with the behind the scenes of corrupt management and when you're hungry for showbiz, or when you're hungry to be in the entertainment world and you have corrupt people lying to you. This is the age-old story of people who go to California. In this film, people being lured to New York City, but it was New York City and California. So not just regulated to Hollywood, but definitely that old Hollywood vibe. This adult film really stands out because of the production value of it, where we have musical numbers, we have kind of a stage show, we have multiple locations, we have comedy, we have absurdity. And we have really kind of this dose of, like I said a million times, old Hollywood. But what else stands out about this film that was a little bizarre to me? We have our two leads here. And the two leads, we have, it stars British sex symbol Susie Mandel and Dory Devon. We also have Eric Edwards and Wade Nichols and Jamie Gillis, but also don't forget we have photography by Roberta Findlay, the infamous one of the few female directors and cinematographers of porn and exploitation and horror cinema. Research her husband too, of course, Michael. But so here's where things get interesting. So the two leads, Susie Mandel and Dory Devon, never seen them before. I love Susie. She's my favorite. She would be this girl right here. But it seems like Susie didn't actually do hardcore. because they were using, like, very obviously, like, she would be naked, like totally naked, but then they would do some really fancy editing with sex scenes so that it was very obviously like another girl with her, like, a wig of hers on, and her face was like different, like, for the hardcore scenes. And so it really got me thinking, like, okay, body doubles are typically for like R-rated, slashers, or, horror films, in general. But body doubles in a hardcore film? Like, isn't that weird? Like, it's like out of place. Like, it doesn't seem to make sense. Um, and it's really a shame because I would love to have seen her actually doing the hardcore scenes, but it's great just to have her naked in the film as well too. So she's so cute. She has this like cutesy, ditzy, dumb, that blonde, dumb vibe. Think of Three's Company. And Dory Devon, who I've never seen before, is definitely doing hardcore in this film, and she is really like. She almost gives me Aunt Peg vibes, but she is really like owning it, living it up, and just going hard. No pun intended. And yes, their names are Candy and Sugar. Yes, yes, yes. So, so that's something really interesting about the movie. Now, we have a couple things going on here. We have, of course, two girls who are being led by thinking they're going to be stars. They want to be stars. And then they're also being led by romance and sex from their own desires. And then there is also the adventure of the, like, valuable piece of jewelry in the film as well. And an inheritance and a luxury apartment. There is behind the scenes of Hollywood. So you're also seeing them, try to get movie roles, trying to get stage theater roles. So you're getting that whole vibe. You're also getting, behind the scenes in the kitchen, or you're getting, living in dire means in some, ramshack apartments and or horse stables. And we have we have theatrical numbers. We have, okay, so there are a couple sections in here. We have, we got twists and turns. We have, kind of absurdist comedy. I wouldn't, maybe a little slapstick, but like really kind of just comedy throughout. And we have just a hilarious section with Jamie Gillis as a director. He's playing a director, I believe. He doesn't have any sex scenes in this film, which is also quite interesting. But it just, again, how good of an actor he is. And I saw a recent interview with Jamie Gillis. I found it, on YouTube. In his latter portion of his life, when he was talking about his Gonzo films, and he stated that he wasn't interested in the business side of things at all in hardcore cinema. He was only interested in having sex. He loved having sex, and then to be able to do it on camera and to be paid for it. And he was also, he loved, as some said, he was an exhibitionist, probably a voyeur, he just loved sex. He wasn't doing it for money, and in this particular section, even though he wasn't having sex, but he was in a room where people were, and he was directing them to. So that really kind of ties into Jamie Gillis. But I would beg to say that he also just had an incredible love for acting. because yes, he was a sex fiend, but he also really seemed to hone the craft of like acting. Like this guy could have done like big movies too. And his scene is just hilarious. And we there you know, we just have sections on an airplane in here, a private jet, sorry. We have sex scenes in here, obviously, but the sex scenes aren't that long. So they're not, this is not a Carlos Tobalina film here, obviously, but they're not long. And there are sections of the film where you're watching it and it's sexy. It almost reminds you of like a teen sex comedy or just a sex comedy in general. And then all of a sudden you're seeing more hardcore stuff, but the sex scenes aren't long per se. Now, I will also say there's another wild and hilarious scene involving gay neighbors in an apartment complex, in the luxury apartment complex, and a drag show at a gay club. Now, just crazy hijinks. You know, in a way, you almost think of like Wayne's World 2 at the gay club with the village people there. But you have this like section of the film involving Candy and Sugar and a drag show and maybe a one-of-a-kind sex scene of, oh, wait, get this, of a girl wanting to have sex with a gay guy and making him think she's a guy. Got it? That's crazy. I don't think I've seen that before. And of course you have, while the lead girls are kind of being led by corrupt management, they're also like aware of it at the same time. They become aware of it very quickly. And so there's a sense where they're not, this isn't your typical story of like, oh, you know, it gets dark and everything. They got led astray and taken advantage of. No, they were taken advantage of mostly financially, but they're pretty in charge in their own, you know, ditzy and not ditzy way. And they also love sex and love guys and love penises, and especially this girl who doesn't do the hardcore scenes. They love, you know, and are driven by sex and sexual adventures, but they also have there's also romance in here as well, when they kind of go with, you know, one guy. And I just realized the movie's called Blonde Ambition and both of them are blonde. Okay, so that makes sense. But there's, you know, you have show tunes, you have narration over the film that kind of has this old Disney quality. You have freeze frames, and as if somebody else is in control of the film and you're aware that it's a film. I think it was Tarantino. I might have said this on this channel before, but I think it was Tarantino who said, there's never a point when I'm watching a movie that I don't realize it's a movie. And with the type of narration that's in Blonde Ambition and the way that it's done with the editing and the way that it's done with the style, you know it's a film. There's also elements, if you remember, I think it's Jackass. Which one is it? Is it Jackass Part 2? I think it's Jackass Part 2 at the end of the film, where they kind of have this musical number with all of their stunts, dangerous stunts, you know, erupting all around them. That is a lot of the vibe of this film, not with those dangerous stunts, but that's a lot of the vibe, the old Hollywood show vibe. You have the drag guys right here, the gay guys. That's a lot of the vibe of Blonde Ambition, where, you know, it doesn't feel like 1980. It feels like the 60s. to maybe the 60s, maybe a little earlier, right? And you're going to notice some hardcore greats in here, as I've mentioned, and also some newbies, which I haven't seen before. This is 1980s Blonde Ambition.